Hello and welcome to Radical Democracy. I'm Maddi Cheers, and I'm very pleased today to have Emma Chasen with us to radically re-examine cannabis. Emma is a wonderful, miraculous millennial. Part of the reason I like to invite a lot of young people to come on is because all the millennials I know are doing some really great work, and I think that part of what we like to do here is break down some stereotypes. So the show is titled it so that we get this idea of the ancient medicine versus the modern commodity. So when we're looking at things like cannabis and even some of the psychogenic drugs, we are looking at things that people have been using for a long, thousands and thousands of years. They've been using these drugs to heal people, and they don't refer to them as drugs. These are plants. These are plant medicines that are put into the hands of people who have a great deal of experience, a great deal of knowledge, and who have been assigned in their communities to be in charge of administering these things, and that these things are shared by healers with their people. So that's part of the reason why we have this sort of disconnect with some of these plant medicines, because in the ancient medicine world, the healer was responsible for healing everybody. And so, as we look at making health care available to everyone, this has been going on with humans for thousands of years, where if you had the job of being the potter, that was great in your community. If you were contributing to your community, that entitled you to the healing that was going on from your healer in your community. So there was what we call sacred reciprocity. So as long as you were contributing, you were entitled to all the services that everyone was also entitled to. So everybody was covered. So that's one of the things we like to talk about here when we talk about the great law of peace and we talk about these ancient cultures. We're looking at information for ourselves. It's obvious that we need a new way on this planet. We need a new way to go. And the new way just might be the old way. A lot of our democracy is built on some ancient ways, and a lot of our healthcare system can learn from ancient ways. And like we talked about last week, certainly taking care of the environment can be learned from ancient ways. So I'm very thrilled to have Emma with us to kind of enlighten us and enlighten me. I mean, really, I'm old. I'm an old hippie, so my entire experience with marijuana was pretty much in high school and college getting high. So I have literally no other experience with that. And I haven't done that for years because I'm too old for that stuff. So I'm going to turn it over to Emma to talk to us about the amazing plant cannabis. Emma.
Hi, Maddi.
Hi,
Thank
Emma.
you so much. Thank you so much for having me on today. I'm really, really excited to have this conversation with you because, as you pointed out, it's really important that we look to the ancient traditional folk modalities of healing to begin to evolve our more westernized healthcare system, which our healthcare system as it stands right now is so broken, and because it is a for-profit system that looks to treat disease as it stands. There's no kind of preventative or prophylactic care that's talked about, and that's something that we can definitely learn from
exactly
indigenous ways. Another thing that I want to point out about folk medicine and healing modalities is that we're typically looking at whole.
Oh, sorry, we lost you.
Beautiful plant medicines. They're not going. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. One more time with that sentence. I think we're having a little glitchy thing going on.
Sure. So I also want to talk about whole plant preparations versus the allopathic model, which is what our current healthcare system uses, which is isolated compounds delivering a specific, predictable set of effects. And usually those come with negative side effects as well as positive side effects. So, for example, if you take an aspirin, you're taking an isolated compound from willow bark, and that is causing a lower inflammatory rate. It also can act as a pain reliever, but if you take it consistently, it may cause you stomach issues. It even could lead to development of ulcers. Now, in the more ancient folk practice, people would chew on the willow bark in order to relieve inflammation, relieve pain. And there were protective compounds in there along with the compound that's specifically responsible for more of the pain relief. There are other supportive compounds that help to protect the stomach lining from the development of ulcers. And so when we talk about cannabis in its ancient whole plant preparations, we need to really honor those and look to how we can continue to create those in the face of the more allopathic, isolated distillate model that we are definitely seeing in the developing cannabis industry as it moves forward.
Exactly. I'm so glad that you brought that up because it seems like, we have a family member that's just socking away money to invest in this, and not the nicest human on the planet, very, very wealthy. And, I think about what happens when people like this get in charge of medicine. And, we see what's going on in the pharmaceutical industry, and it's just tragic when we look at these things that the earth has provided for us, including water. I won't get into that today, but, all these things that are provided for us that really, really should be free, in the sense that, not that anything is free, but in the sense that if you have that idea of reciprocity, if you have that idea of some sort of exchange, these things were put here for all of us. So I really think it does take a way of rethinking how we view all medicine and how we view sharing that with everyone.
Yes, definitely. And sharing the knowledge of how to prepare it, how to consume it, even what dose to take. And that's something that in my work in the cannabis industry, I primarily do education and business development for companies who are merging into the space, because there is just such a lack of this kind of public health knowledge around, okay, what is cannabis even? We went through a century-long period, and in many parts of the country, we're still moving through a period of prohibition that was also accompanied by a lot of propaganda and reefer madness and a lot of unsubstantiated claims around how cannabis is evil and awful and it can ruin your life and make you really apathetic, and it's highly addictive, and all of these things that people have been essentially brainwashed to believe.
Yes.
We are now beginning to shed that, because what we are finding is that, wow, cannabis is really polydynamic, which means that it's not just one thing. It's not just this THC that gets you super high out of your mind that you can't do anything. It's also CBD, which we're seeing has huge therapeutic benefit. It's many other cannabinoids and terpenes and other compounds in that plant matrix that really contribute to a high potential for symptom relief and for the therapeutic management of many different ailments, including cancers and seizure disorders and the like. And so there is this need, this deep need for education, not only in the industry and for industry professionals, but also for the greater consumer population, so that they can make more informed choices for themselves. But right now, because we're still so nascent in the development of the industry, that's just not quite happening yet. And so that's what I do with my company, is really try to give those educational resources, give that scientific-based factual information to the community so that they can make better choices, so that they can support companies that are doing right by the earth, right by patients, and right by the cannabis plant as well.
So what is it that all of us should know when we're looking at, I see CBD stores everywhere popping up, not as much in New York, but, we travel out west a lot. They are everywhere. You see them, and I'm sure in New York they'll be popping up any day now, But so what is it that we, the consumer, need to know about this?
So first, know that not all CBD products are created equal. So CBD typically comes from hemp. If it's being sold in an unregulated market, meaning that if it's sold in a state like New York where there isn't a full access program to cannabis for anyone 21 plus, then it is coming from the hemp plant, which hemp is part of cannabis. It is just a type of cannabis that has less than 0.3% THC, which is your psychotropic compound. It's the compound that gets you high. And that's why CBD products that are sold do not typically make one feel high. However, there is quite a bit of therapeutic potential that you can experience, especially in regards to pain and anxiety and seizure disorders. However, not all of these CBD products are created equal because they're not regulated by anybody at this point. So we're in a really interesting period of history where the government doesn't quite know what to do yet with CBD regulation. And so there isn't a requirement for testing, for example. Typically, all cannabis, THC-dominant cannabis that's grown in a regulated legal market has to undergo analytical testing, where they test for potency, which are the amount of cannabinoids, so THC or CBD present in the product. Then you also need to test for pesticides, and this one is huge. The cannabis and the hemp plant, they are bioaccumulators, which means that they are soaking up whatever they are getting. So if that's from the soil, if that's from the air, if that is from what gets sprayed onto them, that plant is going to accumulate those compounds in its tissues. And this becomes very problematic when we are sourcing hemp from a place, let's say China, that's being grown with high levels of pesticides, that also has access to a lot of pollutants in the air and heavy metals in the soil. And then that plant material comes into the United States. Companies extract with that plant material because it's super cheap, and then don't test for any of the pesticides or heavy metals. So that's a big, big problem. If you are looking to purchase a CBD product, or if you are sourcing CBD, then make sure to ask either the company directly or the person who you're working with in the retail shop. Ask them where that product came from. Ask them if the product came from outside of the United States, or where was it grown in the United States. Also ask how it was grown. Was it grown organically? With the U.S. Farm Bill that happened in 2018, late 2018, early 2019, hemp is now federally legal under the United States for consumption. And so it can be certified USDA organic. So it's important to source hemp that has been certified USDA organic. And furthermore, if you're evaluating products such as a vape cartridge, which we've seen a whole slew of problems with vaping-related lung injuries lately, make sure to ask the company if they have a test result or a certificate of analysis that particularly outlines that there are no contaminants, there are no flavoring agents, there are no pesticides, no heavy metals, and that the potency reading on that product is true to what it is being marketed as.
Wow. That's so much, for something so new. You definitely get the feeling that people rushed, into this. And of course, once again, China, my beef with China all around is, and many other people's beef, not just me, but I find it difficult to trust anything that comes out of China. And while I think it's wonderful that we've made hemp legal in this country, finally, what made it illegal was William Randolph Hearst, when he found out you could make paper out of it, and it was going to threaten his paper mills. So it was only the reason it was illegal was very backhanded and had to do with one person's wealth. But now that all that's gone by, I think all the things that you bring up are really, really important. And those things are important for just about any over-the-counter product that you're going to buy. I mean, and not to mention the fact that you should do all the research in the world, I think, on every product, whether it's an FDA-approved product or a prescription product. I think you need to do your own research on these things. And also, one of the things that we talk about a lot in healing work is that one size does not fit all. We have the idea in this country that, everybody can just take this antidepressant and they'll all not be depressed anymore. So here's our $11 billion, what I think I read, it's up to a $31 billion industry in antidepressants now. And it's one drug that we now know basically does not treat anything other than organic depression. And yet we've got millions and millions of people taking it as if one drug is going to have the same effect on every single person. And I think that in the rush to get cannabis to market, and make it legal, there's a lot of steps that we're skipping, not to mention the problem with using it, misusing it, and then also with the problem with making so much profit on it that it's hard to even trust a product anymore.
Right, exactly. And these companies that are creating such shortcuts and favoring profits over consumer experience, over patients. I mean, we have an incredibly sick population that Western medicine can't really offer a solution. And this is particularly when we look at certain types of cancers as well as seizure disorders, especially in young children. And so desperate parents are looking to source CBD products because they've heard miraculous stories around it. But instead, they're getting, snake oil and elixirs that are being sold on Amazon by these shark-like companies that are just looking to make a profit. And that is evil. It doesn't get any more evil than giving this kind of tainted snake oil without any medicinal properties, selling it as a medicine, and giving that to really sick kids. That is unacceptable to me, and that's why it's so important that we share this kind of information to consumers of, hey, not everything is created equal. There was such a rush to market, and therefore we're having to kind of backtrack with regulations to make sure that there are safe products on the market that are not being manipulatively marketed as such.
Exactly. Celia has a question for you. And by the way, for those of you that haven't figured this out yet, you cannot call in tonight because Emma's calling in, but you can listen on Facebook. And if you're listening on Facebook, I will see your comments and your questions. So thank you, Celia, and thank you, Marianne, for listening. And Celia's question is, what are the benefits of CBD?
So CBD, I call it quite a promiscuous compound. So it really gets around the body in terms of its physiological mechanisms. It has high therapeutic potential. It is also incredibly safe. So as you mentioned, Maddi, with antidepressants, there are a lot of negative side effects associated with that, whereas with CBD, it can act as an antidepressant, but you won't have any of those negative side effects. The greatest negative side effect that we see shared among people is drowsiness if you get up to a certain dose. But even then, that's an incredibly high dose that one would experience that kind of drowsiness where it would be uncomfortable. As far as the different properties that CBD may exhibit, we are looking at a huge anti-inflammatory benefit. So It has an incredible anti-inflammatory power, way more than an aspirin. And of course, inflammation breeds disease. So if you can bring down your inflammation, then you will not be in a disease state, or hopefully resolve your disease state quicker. It also has analgesic potential, meaning it can act as a pain reliever. It does actually have the ability to interact with our opioid receptors in our brain, which of course help to modulate the pain response. And so it can just quiet down the pain. It can also act as an anticonvulsant. That's why it's so important for people who are experiencing seizure disorders or any kind of spasm disorders. CBD can help to calm the muscles down. It can act as a muscle relaxant, which again is why you can get drowsiness in high concentrations. It also has documented anti-proliferative effects, meaning that it can help you to reduce tumor size in cancer patients, specifically when combined with chemotherapy. CBD also has incredible benefits when it comes to the side effects of chemotherapy. It can help to act as an anti-nausea, it can help get the appetite up, and it can also help to improve mood as it interacts with our serotonin receptors, which allow us to feel less anxiety. CBD really, in its essence, is what we call a homeostatic agent. So it helps the body to achieve balance quicker. So this can even mean if you are feeling super cold, if you take some CBD, it can help to warm you up a little. If you are in an inflamed state, then it can act as an anti-inflammatory and kind of so on and so forth. However, what I will say is that CBD as an isolated compound does not work as well as when CBD is prepared in a whole plant or full spectrum preparation, where it does have some supportive compounds along with it. And that is touching on a theory called the entourage effect, that all of the compounds in the cannabis matrix work together to help increase the likelihood for medical efficacy. And so if you are sourcing a CBD product, I would look for something that has been tested, that is USDA organic, and that also has full spectrum on its labeling. That means that there is a certain amount of additional cannabinoids as well as compounds called terpenes that will help CBD to have the most benefit possible.
Wow. I know it's amazing how much benefit there are in these plant medicines, and I know there's more and more research into the benefits of some of the psychotropics, even in terms of treating PTSD. Are there any applications with cannabis and PTSD and depression and what we're seeing in our returning soldiers?
Yes, definitely. So an incredible medical doctor and researcher, Dr. Sue Sisley, is doing research around cannabis and PTSD, specifically expressed in war veterans. And what she's finding is that THC actually is really helpful in the management of PTSD, because what THC does is it blocks the emotional part of the brain from talking to the pain part of the brain and the memory part of the brain. And that's where PTSD is so overwhelming, because you have such emotion tied to these trauma memories that if you cut the physiological link to that emotion, meaning how you feel it in the body, and if you also cut the memory to that tied to that emotion, then PTSD patients can experience the trauma-related memory without having that intensely painful emotional response. And that is, THC is really helpful for that. For depression, we are seeing CBD being much more helpful, as THC can kind of cause and breed apathy and depression in higher doses over a consistent period of time, where CBD seems to actually help the body to balance its serotonin as well as its GABA, another really important neurotransmitter in our brain that links to stress and mood as well.
See, and this is where I really feel like the whole ancient approach to, I shouldn't even call it ancient, because there are certainly many traditional practitioners around today who use the approach of using the plant within the context of the community. So like when we did have people returning from war years and years ago in these cultures where they saw themselves having a relationship with the plant, and the plant has a relationship with the person, and then the people are around as a community to also support that person. Everything goes hand in hand. And I think part of the problem that we're talking about with the way we look at medicine is, here, take a pill and you're all better. You know, we want to give you this pill. We don't really want to talk to you, hang out with you. Just take the pill, take your medicine, which is one of the things that Phil will talk about next week with Crazy Wise, with the film Crazy Wise, is how important community is. And when we go to using these plant medicines, I'm also hoping that we look at the context within which they were used for thousands of years, that it is part of the responsibility of the community to grow the plant safely. It's part of the responsibility of the healer to use it with the person that needs to be healed in a specific way. And then it's also the responsibility of the person who's being healed to agree to be healed. But with the support of a community with you, that's a whole lot easier to achieve. So to me, the exciting thing about going back to these ancient plants is I'm hoping that we also go back to the wisdom around how to use these plants in a community setting.
Yes, definitely. And I think that touches on this larger issue of, we need to think about health in a holistic paradigm. And the beautiful thing about plant medicine, especially cannabis, is that it is highly variable. Your relationship with cannabis is incredibly unique to you, because your physiology is always fluctuating. It is in a constant state of flux, trying to achieve balance. And the system in our bodies that allows us to have experiences from cannabis, called the endocannabinoid system, or the ECS, is also always in a state of flux. And so it is really important that when somebody begins to reframe and develop their relationship with cannabis, that they think about it in this holistic context, that they think about it as kind of ever-changing, experimental, and that they also need to think about their spiritual, emotional, mental health, as well as rely on the greater ecosystem of their community. And I think that that is such an important reframing of the idea of health, where it's not just, okay, you take a pill, or in the case of cannabis, okay, here's your CBD oil, you take the same dose every day, because that's not going to work for you. If you have come home from a day and had a shitty day at work or had a fight with your partner, well, then the medicine may not work in the same way, because those two other areas of health are in a state of imbalance. And so how do you take care of those areas as well as taking care of the more cellular physiological aspects? Because, I mean, stress and mental state and emotional state absolutely relate to how your body will hold that. And whether it's inflammation or it's pain or it's depressed mood, an exogenous or outside of the body agent will not take care of something when the root cause is more mental or more emotional. And so I absolutely agree. And it's why I'm so excited about plant medicine and about looking at it from an ethnobotanical perspective, as well as all of these other entheogens and psychotropic therapeutics, because it does help take people out of like, whoa, okay, this Western allopathic system, while it's great for certain things, there are amazing technological advancements where, yes, if you're having a heart attack, like, please go to the hospital.
Right.
But if you are trying to prevent disease, or if you are trying to generally remain in a state of health, Western healthcare is not the best for that. And that's where plant medicines definitely, as I call it, can bring about this botanical revolution, which I think is so necessary when we are going to evolve in different ways of thinking about how we take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's one of the real beauties, I think, of having young people involved in this, is that, you know, you have the energy to get it out there, and the commitment and the passion to make people understand that we need a new approach. We need a new approach to all medicine. And we need to start looking to each other to help out. I mean, I always go back to how when the warriors were returning from war, they were kept aside, and the medicine people in the community would work with them to bring them back into balance, using the plants, using the songs, using the prayers, using whatever they could to return the person to wholeness. There was a recognition that if you go through something traumatic like that, you need help. And it's only recently that we've even addressed PTSD as a problem for people who have gone to war. And I just think that the plant medicines are some of the best things that we can look at in order to heal people who've been through any trauma. I mean, a lot of people have been through trauma, whether it's the trauma of having gone off to war or the trauma of being in an abusive relationship. And the plants just seem especially good, and the community is especially good at bringing us forward out of those traumatic experiences.
Yes, and it's because they are relatively gentle. I mean, I know growing up, I definitely was a dare kid, and I was very afraid of cannabis and many other drugs. But the reality is that these plant medicines, meaning cannabis and psilocybin, and even from medicinal mushrooms, are really, really gentle, actually very, very safe, very low risk, and especially if you take them in the context of your community, educate yourself, and you speak to other people around their experiences, and you track your own experiences, and you do it, well, then they are a lot safer than most of these pharmaceuticals on the market. And that's why cannabis is especially exciting for people who do have to take a lot of pharmaceuticals, who are prescribed a lot of pharmaceuticals, because it can lead to a dose reduction in those just like mass amounts of pills that they have to take daily just to function. And that will just as a result connect you back with your community, as those pharmaceuticals typically do have some kind of like devastating effects just on mood and
Oh.
and other general functions of
Yes.
the body.
Not to mention exactly the devastating effects on the body. But I love that you brought up that the patient, you the client, have to be very, very aware of what's going on. You have to take responsibility for yourself and do the research necessary. You know, there's this huge, I don't know if you're aware of this being in Portland, but here in New York, there's this huge movement, I don't even know what to call this, with people taking ayahuasca. I mean, like huge groups of people going and taking ayahuasca and thinking that this is going to heal them, this is going to open their mind, this is going to, help them. And it's sadly largely young people that get sucked into this because there isn't a lot of information out there on what and how this particularly powerful drug is used. And I certainly get the desire for people to open up their minds in all of this, but that especially is a plant that is used, or a combination of plants that's used traditionally with one person, 1-to-1, maybe the most 2-to-1, with a healer who knows exactly how to treat you as you're using this plant, who knows exactly how much you particularly need, who's gotten to know you, who's talked with you, who's had that conversation, who knows why you need this, or maybe has decided you don't. But it is normally a one-on-one or at most a one-on-two situation. And here we've got huge groups of people doing this together with horrific stories coming out of these experiences. And then you have the very, very, very conventional medicine people using these experiences to go, you can't trust those plant medicines. We don't know what we're doing. And to a degree, these people don't know what they're doing. But I don't want to see these things get written off when they probably have a wonderful application if they are used in the right way. And that's the problem, is we really have to take responsibility for ourselves in that way and not just jump into something that we don't know about or that we have no idea how it's going to affect us personally.
Right, because then, as you said, it demonizes the plant medicine,
right.
Which, no, the plant medicine is actually really powerful. There's a lot of potential, but if you take it out of the indigenous paradigm, and if you take it out of the ritual that was used in that one-on-one healing space, and you put it into this Western context of large groups of people where they're looking at it as more of like, oh, this is going to heal me, this is a cure-all, this is my fix. Well, that's not the way to approach any kind of plant medicine. And that's the same deal with...
Oh, I lost you there for a second.
CBD is, CBD is going to cure me. Am I back? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
So go ahead, just repeat that last sentence you said, Emma, please.
Sure, yeah. So just saying that the idea that this plant medicine is going to heal me, or it's going to save me, it's going to cure all of my issues and ailments, that is no way to interact or approach any kind of plant medicine. Plant medicine is not a cure-all. Nothing is a cure-all. And that's the same idea with cannabis. And unfortunately, what we've seen with CBD, especially when people get products from companies that are unethical and they are cutting corners to favor profits over people, then people have experiences with CBD that are uncomfortable or neutral or just not ideal, and they go, oh, well, cannabis doesn't work for me, or CBD doesn't work. It's like, well, no, the plant medicine does work. There is high potential, high healing potential here. It is just more that the way that it's being used, the way that it's being kind of packaged and manufactured and put out into the world, that's what's not working.
Right, exactly. And so my question to you is, I actually have a couple more questions, but this one came to mind. So if you're getting a good organic CBD or THC or whatever's being prescribed to you, then what does that cost? About how much is that going to run? And is it prescribed by a doctor? How do people start to get a hold of this?
So in regulated legal markets where you do have access to CBD and THC, you don't have to go to a doctor to get a medical card. So it is 21 plus. If you are 21 years of age or older, you can go to a dispensary and you can purchase any product that you like that's on the shelf. Unfortunately, as I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, there isn't a lot of standardized education or training that happens. And again, it's a lot of what my company does is try to make sure that these people, often called bud tenders behind the counter at these retail dispensaries, actually are able to recommend products and talk about them with a degree of scientific legitimacy, because that's very important. In retail dispensaries, I'd say for a very high quality CBD mixed with some THC tincture, you'd be looking at around $100 per bottle. Now, that you can spend $8 on a chocolate bar with a ton of THC in there. But if you want like high quality medicine, then you'd be looking at more of the $100 price point. Now, if you are in a medically regulated market, then you do need a medical card. So that's like New York. New York is medically regulated. And so you would have to go to a doctor who would then sign off on your medical card. And there are a list of qualifying conditions where it's, okay, if you have cancer, then you can get a medical card. If you have a medical card, if you have a seizure disorder, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, and this again speaks to just how backwards our healthcare system, unfortunately, cannabis is still a Schedule 1 substance. That means
Emma?
Dangerous substances in the eyes of the federal government. Yes.
Sorry, you're cutting in and out. Do you maybe you need to move somewhere, or I don't know if we're getting some interference from Portland. But I kind of lost some of the things you said about the how CBD or THC is used medically.
Okay, so I just moved. So let's see if that helps. So in medical markets, you need to get a medical card in order to be able to have access to products in different medical dispensaries, and a doctor can sign off on your medical card. However, they are liable to actually recommend cannabis to you, and this is because that our current healthcare system, again, very backwards. Cannabis in the eyes of the federal government is still a Schedule 1 substance, meaning that the federal government sees it as one of the most dangerous substances on the planet. And because doctors are insured nationally, they are insured under the federal government, it is a liability for them to actually talk about cannabis with patients. And so, unfortunately, patients are kind of on their own to learn about it by themselves and to educate themselves around what's going to work for them or what products they should be sourcing.
Okay, so I just have to give a plug for getting money out of government. Oh my gosh. This is, as I said earlier, this is William Randolph Hearst. This is the only reason that marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug is because he didn't want hemp competing with his paper industries, his cutting down trees. So he pushed to get it as a Schedule 1 drug. And really, guys, we're in 2019. And we now know the medicinal uses, and nobody is talking about, well, not nobody, you and I are talking about it, and I'm sure there are other people talking about it, but that needs to change. Are we kidding already? Yep. Come on.
Right?
And I mean,
Isn't that ridiculous?
It's ridiculous. And I just saw, not to mention one of the most renewable sources on the planet. I just read a whole article on how they can now make hemp so that it acts and feels just like cotton for clothing. So, and is cheaper, is much cheaper.
Yes, and uses 3 cotton.
I know. I mean, it's really crazy. Like, I definitely have these feelings, about, term limits, money out of government, and lobbying out of government, because we're not serving the people. And some of these things that serve the people they're just logic. It's just, okay, we know how this started. Now let's end it. That's enough already. No more William Randolph Hearst. We also know that, lumber mills are polluting rivers all over, especially up where you are. They're a huge problem. So, it's enough already. And this dragging our feet about all of this is not helping any of us. And instead, we're fighting and arguing and really being used by the people who want power. They're pitting us against each other so that they can stay in power. And we really need to say no to this. This really needs to stop. This us against them mentality, it just has to stop. And, hence my motto, anybody but a Democrat or a Republican in 2020. I know that ticks off some of my friends, but I really think that's what we need. We need to kick them all out and start over, because they're not serving us. And cannabis is just one example of how they're not serving us. And
right. Oh my God.
It's just nonsense. It's enough already. It's enough. So, so my other question to you has to do with, so in an ideal world where this is available to everybody, what would you see going along with the use of cannabis? How would you like to see it distributed? How would you, what are your dreams? What's your healthcare system, Emma?
So I think that in regards to cannabis, we definitely need better testing regulations. We need testing labs that are not for profit, that are actually universally standardized, so we can have better data. We have a lot of issues with labs falsifying results if they get paid more money by the growers and the different manufacturers out here, which is awful. And so making sure that, again, the products that are getting tested that actually have ethical, reliable test results, that's really important. I also think that we should be focusing way more on whole plant preparations and full spectrum methodology to retain as many of those diverse compounds as possible. I think that we also need social consumption compassion centers. So I don't think that it's really smart to dispense plant medicine to people without any kind of education, knowledge, guidance. It's just acted as a kind of retail transaction. They pay, you give them their product. What to do with it? No, they don't know what spaces where people can actually sit down with somebody and the patient or the new consumer can learn how to consume this product. They can have a consumption experience with a trained guide, with a professional, with a healer, like you were saying, Maddi. That is such an important context of it. That's such an important way to create community around this medicinal plant. And then I think beyond cannabis, I definitely am in support of the decriminalization of many of the entheogens with high therapeutic potential, such as psilocybin, MDMA, and LSD. I think that there's some incredible work happening from high-level research institutions such as Johns Hopkins University that is just finding such incredible healing attributes tied to psilocybin specifically and its ability to act as a neuroplasticity agent, meaning it can help to create new neurons in the brain, new neural pathways, and actually has a very high potential as a curative for anxiety and depression. And right now, in our Western context, we do not have a curative for anxiety or depression. And so I think that we need to begin to decriminalize these amazing entheogens and, again, give access to more people. And of course, finally, there is also a very important aspect of all of this that I need to mention, in that right now in the cannabis industry, it is mostly white people profiting off of this thing. And that is a damn sin when the war on drugs was manufactured by the government to destabilize marginalized communities. And Black and brown communities People are still getting arrested for cannabis, even in states that are legal, and they are not gaining access to this industry because such high capital is needed, and that is unacceptable. And so there needs to be way more equity programs so that the people who have risked their lives and their families to be in this industry, to grow this plant for the last 100 years, need to be able to have access to the legal industry now. There is no reason why tons of white men in business suits should be profiting off of this plant when there are still more people sitting in jail for cannabis crimes than any other crimes currently. That is horrible.
Couldn't agree with you more.
That also is necessary as part of my ideal vision.
Absolutely. The person that I know that invests in this just motivated by greed. And the really sad part of that is that it is the black and brown cultures that gave us these plants. You know, I mean, they're the people that know how to use it. Their elders are the ones that know how to use the psilocybin so that it doesn't get abused, so that it doesn't cause harm, so that it's used in a therapeutic sense. They're the ones that know how to use the marijuana in a way that it heals and benefits a person, a patient, the community. So it's just so ironic that we have this flip once again, where the very people who brought us what we need are being cut out, and not just being cut out, but they're the ones getting arrested, you know, and suffering from this. Whereas, well, you said it better than I did. We'll just go with what you said. I agree. That's my statement. Totally agree. But that's the injustice of the system. Mm-hmm. And when we, you know, I was just talking with my Kiowa niece about this. You know, when we talk about this concept of white privilege, we have to get away from the guilt tripping, but understand that it is a real thing. We don't want to make people feel guilty, but we do have to have this conversation. We do have to talk about the fact that those of us who were raised in such a way to believe in ourselves, to know that we could be anything we wanted to be, that we had all the potential in the world, that we could grow up to be, you know, president or CEO or any of those things, that we have to share that knowledge. We have to share that confidence. We have to acknowledge that we were raised that way, that we were taught that, but there are groups of people that have been abused by those of us who went ahead and got to make a profit and got to, you know, sugar, hello, Domino Sugar. You know, I mean, there are reasons why we're still in these conflicts. And if we can sit down and have these conversations from a loving, open-hearted, open-minded space without making people feel guilty, but with recognizing that my experience in the world is completely different from my Kiowa niece, who is, you know, 1/3 Native American, 1/3 white, and 1/3 black. And her, you know, her experience of the world growing up, though she had wonderful, wonderful parents, just her experience in the world in general is totally different than was my experience. I mean, you know, there was some prejudice for me growing up because we were Jewish, but it's not, it's gone now. I mean, that is largely, although it's sadly making a comeback, anti-Semitism, unfortunately. But it's important to recognize that these cultures have had vastly different experiences in this country than some of us in the dominant culture. You know, that it's important to acknowledge that, and it's important to correct the injustices. And a lot of the injustices, like you just pointed out, are around these medicines, around these plants that that should be out there for everybody, and we should be acknowledging the cultures that gave us these plants. I mean, psilocybin we wouldn't even know about if it weren't for the woman from Mexico that was discovered by an anthropologist, and she believes that she lost. I wish I could think of the name. If my husband was listening, he could tell me the name. I can't think of her name right now, but she believes that
Maria.
Yeah, Maria. Oh, it'll come to me. Hopefully, it will come to one of us. But she believes that she lost her ability to work with her friends. I think she called them her children, the mushrooms, because people.
Oh yes, and it's Maria Sabina.
Yes, Maria Sabina, and she felt like she lost her ability to work with them because they were taken and used only for profit. And
right.
and at her, because she was part of that, she for a very long time felt like they were no longer her allies. And then I think towards the end of her life, she started to work with them again. But that's the thing, is that you know, when we don't recognize the energetic properties of all medicines, of every person, of what we're doing, the energy changes things. It changes the way you receive a medicine, the way you receive a food, that just having gratitude. I mean, even if you know, you're the beneficiary of CBD or psilocybin, if just you take a moment and just say thank you to the cultures that brought this to me so that I can be healed, and just take that recognition, and then, you know, that makes a big difference. It makes a big difference in the way the medicine works with you, and it makes a big difference with the way you work within the community.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, what we continue to see throughout history and throughout evolution is just this white imperialist mindset that values profits over people. That was the birth of this kind of insane neo-capitalism that we're in now, that no matter what, whose was it before, who had respect for it before, I can rape and pillage and take it and then make a ton of money at the expense of people. And that is evil. That is evil. And as we continue to explore these plant medicines, as we bring them to light in a legal paradigm, I completely agree that we need to set intention and have gratitude and pay homage to all of the people who came before us that actually spent time cultivating this, that risked their lives to bring medicine to the community when all of us were demonizing them for it.
Yes.
And now, all of a sudden, because we see that we can make money on it, that doesn't matter anymore. No, that is not the way that these types of medicines should be approached, because I completely agree that it will lose some of its energetic power, and that's really looking at the spiritual arm of the holistic health paradigm, where you need to have gratitude. It's an energy exchange with these plants, especially the more psychotropic ones, where you need to put something into it just so that you can receive the medicine from it. And that is as simple as you said, Maddi, sitting down with an intention of gratitude before a consumption experience.
Exactly. And I think that, you know, when we look at the greed going on with our dealings with China, you know, how's that going to bounce back for us? We're just going to, you know, we've got big companies like Nike, the NBA, I can't remember the gaming company that's involved in it. But you've got these gigantic companies going, no, we're just going to ignore the slave labor that's raising the plants. You know, we're just going to ignore the gulags. We're just going to ignore the million, you know, Muslims that are being kept and with their women are being sterilized against their will. We're just going to ignore all these human rights violations. The UN named China number 10 on the hit parade of worst human rights violators. But, you know, we're going to ignore that because why? We can make money. We can make some money. And I mean, this is just, to me, absolutely unconscionable. And how's that going to blow back on us? I mean, what's the return if we're going to stand for that? And I'm not a boycott advocate, because there are a lot of little people that make their living and support their families on a lot of these products. But I mean, personally, be aware of it. Me personally, not buying any more Nike stuff, not going to, not that I was a big basketball fan, but, it's not like it's a big sacrifice. Not like I'm going, going to big sacrifice for not watching a basketball game or something. But I really think somewhere in your spirit, you have to decide what you're going to do. I mean,
yes,
really.
And vote with your dollar.
Vote with your dollars.
Small businesses. Choose minority-owned companies.
Thrift
Choose
stores.
People who are formulating ethically.
Right, exactly. Ethically. Exactly. So, Miss Emma, do you want to give your company a plug real quick? Because we've got about 30 seconds before we're off the air.
Sure, yes. So my company is Eminent Consulting, and you can find me online at eminentconsultingfirm.com or simply at emmachasen.com, and it'll direct you there as well.
Well, thank you, sweetheart. I'm so happy you came on. I hope we get to have you on again for an update. And I love you, and all of you listeners.
I love you.
I love you too. I love all of you miraculous millennials who are going to take us into a beautiful future. That's my belief. And I want to thank my producer, Bobby Lacera, and everybody here at Strong Island Radio and Strong Island Entertainment. Listen in. There's some great stuff going on here. I wish you all peace, love, and freedom. Go.